Transcendental Transformation, the place where spirituality and transformation unite. Host Miss Raina imparts truth so that you can break through your limiting beliefs and evolve into a deeper consciousness. As you go about your day, remember, before every breakthrough, there is a breakdown. And now, let's start the show.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Transcendental Transformation. I'm your host, Miss Raina, and today is Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. As always, we are coming live from the Sirius Star System studios right here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I hope all is well with everything. So, Venus is in retrograde, and I don't know about you guys, but at least here in Florida, for probably like the past month and a half, we've been able to see the beautiful planet of Venus in the sky, and it's always in the west, and it's always by itself. It's big and bright, and it's such a beautiful thing to see. And now it is going back in retrograde. So I know we all think about retrogrades. Retrogrades are tough for us. We have a lot of maybe ill feelings towards retrogrades, but retrogrades really get a bad rap. And I'm not going to go into it today because we get so much. We have so much stuff to cover today that it's just going to be too much to talk about. But yes, sometimes retrogrades live up to their name, and it did for me a little bit. I was working on my website. I was trying to work on the RSS feeds this weekend, and somehow it deleted my whole website. So I have not been pleased. I've been trying to do a restore update, and it's been about 2 days now that it's been restoring. So hopefully, let's cross our fingers and hope that it works, because that's going to be really hard if I've lost my whole website, my blogs, everything. Is going to be really, really tough. So but this retrograde is important because it's really about slowing down. It's about slowing your roll down, slowing everything down, and just kind of taking stock of who you are, where you're at, what you want to kind of just take inventory of your life, see what's going on, and just kind of get your bearings. And that a lot of times we're thinking spring is a time for it is a time. Spring is a time for planting and sowing what you reap in the future months. But this retrograde is really about really taking the time to rest and relaxation, and kind of just to see where everything's at. So it's a really good time to just kind of pause everything. I know a lot of you are getting out of quarantine jail, and I know a lot of you want to go out and do stuff, but during this retrograde, which is going to last for the next month, just try to take it easy, try to relax, try to see what's going on in your life, and try to figure out what it is that you maybe like to eliminate, and maybe the things that you want to see in the future. Okay, so it is finally happening, and I'm kind of upset about this. Today I got a message from FPL saying that there's going to be drones flying all over in my area, and they're supposed to check the power lines, and I have an issue with this because this is against our amendment rights, and this is the beginning stages of people spying on us, our government soon to be spying on us. Like all things, they always want to get you used to everything, and so you just think, it's no big deal, and then they slowly implement other things and slowly take away your rights, and this is going to be a big problem, because pretty soon the police are going to be doing this, and they're going to say, it's for your safety, we need to keep it for your children and all this stuff. And no, it's just going to be a bunch of big spying on the American public. So I am not thrilled about this. And yes, if you shoot down a drone, it is a felony. They make it that way so that you're kind of handcuffed. You can't do anything about what they want to do, and if you try to, you're going to jail. So welcome to America. So all right, guys, that's enough of my rant for today. But as always, we're coming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Periscope, and LinkedIn. So make sure you go check us out on all those sites and like us. And if you have any questions, my Padawan Caleb is on Facebook and Twitch. Feel free to live chat us there, and we'll take care of everything there. So if you guys have any questions, talk to him, and he'll let me know, okay? And we can talk on the show. So tonight's show is, I want to change a little bit about tonight's show because, one of the things that I notice is so many of us struggle with life. And not just that we have struggles, but so many of us struggle with our struggles, if that makes sense. So many of us talk about these ideas of happiness and love and compassion and understanding, and we all seem to be running this race. We all seem to be trying to figure out what the concoction or what the path is to find these ideas. Because for most of us, we say, oh well, we're happy as if we have a house, if we have a relationship, if we have a car, if we have a successful job, if we have all these things, and that equals happiness. That means we don't struggle, etc., etc. And for many of us, that is a very hard thing to do because no one's life is perfect. We all have struggles in our lives, whether it be financial, whether it be personal, whether it be sexual, whether it be racial, whether it be gender, whether it be abuse. I mean, there are so many mental struggles, there are emotional struggles. There are so many different types of struggles in our lives, and I thought it'd be a good time because this is spring, and with retrograde coming in, and kind of the idea of taking a step back and kind of reevaluating what your role is and where you're going and everything like that. I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of get things going in that direction. So I want to ask you guys just to close your eyes a little bit, just for a second. And if I mention this word, I want you to think about what the first thing that pops up in your mind. So if I mention the word freedom, what is freedom? What do you picture when you hear the word freedom? What does that mean to you? What is the ideas that pop up into your head? The word freedom. What does it represent? Do you have any ideas? Are you having any pictures? Are you seeing anything? Maybe for some people out there, it's a personal thing. Maybe when we think of freedom, we think of personal freedom. Doing what we want, being who we are, doing what we desire. And maybe for others, it's political. Maybe for some of us, our business, maybe doing the jobs that we want and having the political or business freedom to be, to live the way we want to. And so I want you to just think about that for a second. Because the definition of freedom is the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. So I want to read that again. The power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants without hindrance or restraint. So the two key words there are hindrance and restraint, right? We think of freedom as the power of right to act without hindrance or restraint. And for many of us, we take these ideas of freedom and it has value. Especially here in the United States, we are all about freedom, right? We have our constitutional rights. We have our amendments. I mean, that's what I just mentioned a little bit ago about a drone, right? It's taking away our amendment rights. It's our freedom. And thus, here in America, we place a lot of value. And I'm sure everywhere in other countries, too, they have value of freedom as well, especially in any country that's repressed. So if I say, we take this idea of freedom, people fight for freedom, people believe in freedom and what it means, and what we think of freedom is, if we think of that we have freedom, that we would find happiness, right? We would find peace. We'd be living the life that we want to live without hindrance, without restraint, because that is what freedom is about, right? That is the idea that we have that freedom is. That freedom is going to give us a sense of peace. We'll be able to live in harmony with ourselves and with our ideas in a sense of peace. We will be able to be free from maybe emotional chaos, mental chaos, physical chaos, and all these ideas we might have popping up in our head. Because as many of us hear word freedom, it's going to mean something different to everybody. And so we're going to have to ask ourselves, what type of freedom, if we sit here and think about the word freedom, what type of freedom is most important to you? What kind is it? Is it political? Is it emotional? Is it business? What is the word freedom mean, and what is it the most to you, the importance? Because if it is political, well, then that could mean many different things. If it's emotional freedom, if it's personal freedom, if it's business freedom, maybe it's all of them in one. But let's ask ourselves this: is freedom real? Is it a real concept? Is the idea of freedom a real concept? Or is it just a construct, a concept that is created by our minds? Where does it come from? Where does this idea come from? I'm sure we can look it up on Google and YouTube right now and search for it and find where it started from. But that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking where this idea comes from. If you think of freedom, if you think of these ideas, these concepts, and that, where does it come from? Does it come from our feelings? Because here in America, we're supposed to be a country based on freedoms, even though we're not. We're supposed to have mental freedom. We're supposed to have emotional freedom. We're supposed to be able to pick and choose whatever we want to do. And thus, we're supposed to be able to do and live the way we want to do. And for many of us, we go out there, we go to school, we can pick and choose what we want to do. But a lot of times we always have this idea that we're supposed to do that we're supposed to take these paths that our parents took, or maybe that society wants from us. And I know for a lot of us, that are raised with very strict families, very strict parents, depending on the ethnic groups and everything, they could be pushing you towards a type of career, towards type of marriage, towards type of relationships, towards type of friends, all sorts of ideas. And so I really want to take us down this road of thought tonight. I really want us to think about these ideas of freedom, these ideas and where it's going to take us, what we really truly think of it, because it's going to tie into so much more of what we're going to talk about later. And I really want us to get an idea. And I want to ask ourselves, why do we hold this idea of freedom so close to us? Why is this idea of freedom so precious to us? What makes it so valuable? For many of us, we go out every single day and we live in a sort of freedom, right? Our minds think that because we can choose to go out whenever we want, we can go out and date whoever we want. For a lot of us, we can pick whatever career we want. We can, there's so many different ways that we are looking at them. So why is this idea of freedom so valuable to us? What is it? So if we chase freedom, then if we're this idea of freedom and there holds value to us, and if we chase it, how do we know if we achieve it? How do we know if it's something that we really have? Because it's like happiness and love, right? I ask people what love is, I ask people what happiness is, and they usually give me two basic answers. Happiness is when you're feeling happy and you're laughing and you're full of joy and you're not full of sorrow, and love is when you care for somebody. But that's not what happiness is, and that's not what love is. And a lot of times, most of the people I ask about happiness and love, other than asking those two things, they can't answer it. So if we have this idea of freedom, and whether it's emotional, mental, physical, political, and then how do we know if we're going to achieve it? How do we know if once we finally have it, that we finally achieve it? If the idea of freedom is real, then what capabilities does it give us? Why is this so important to us? Because it's a desire that we have within us, within all humanity, not just Americans, and everybody, to be free of everything, to be free of politics, to be free of tyranny, to be free of mental, emotional, and physical struggle, to be free of all these ideas, right? So what capabilities, what power does this idea give us? Does it give us hope? Does it give us power? Maybe it gives us power and strength. Maybe this idea of freedom is really what we're kind of chasing after. And therefore we have to ask ourselves, why is this so important to us? Freedom is one of those ideas that lives with who we are. And so we have to take this idea and truly understand who we are to understand the idea of what freedom means to us, to understand what value it can bring to us. So if freedom lives in who we are, then that means freedom has no bounds, right? It has no boundaries, it has no limitations, because it has no restraint. But yet every single day, we all live with restraint. We all live with bounds. We all live with these ideas and concepts and limitations of judgment and struggle. Every single day, we live in a world of limitation. And maybe that's what makes it so important for us. Maybe this idea of freedom is almost like the golden star that we're trying to reach, the epitome of of just an accomplishment. Because if we can reach freedom, that means we are boundless, we are limitless. That means there is no restraint, and we can truly be who we want to be without any form of limitation. And so we ask ourselves, if we value freedom so much, and it allows us to expand ourselves beyond physical limitation, beyond mental limitation, beyond our limitations in any sort, and it creates this belief, then is it true? Is this concept true? And that's really what we have to ask ourselves in that aspect. Because if these concepts are true, therefore they exist. If they're not true, then where are they? And that begs the question, is freedom real? Because if these concepts are true, then they have value. If they're not true, then how do they have so much value? How do they have so much weight? How do they pull us in and we become a slave to these ideas? Because every single person wants freedom. Every single person wants these ideas that we look so hard for. Every single person wants to be free. And we're going to be right back after these messages from the life of Raina.
A message from the life of Raina. We live in a world faced with many tough challenges. Our lives become chaotic and filled with disaster ever so quickly, most of the time before we even realize. Our issues beat down our mental mindset, and an imbalance of emotions become prevalent. The life of Raina is dedicated to helping people on the deepest spiritual level. Miss Raina, the creator of Transcendental Development and Growth, works on your core issues and finds the solutions which allow you to break free from the emotional bondages of life, helping you achieve the life you've always wanted to live. Isn't it time that you lived life for you? Call the Life of Raina, 561-846-2190, and schedule your appointment today. That's 561-846-2190. Or email thelifeofraina@icloud.com.
All right, everybody, we are back, and if you're just joining us, I am Miss Raina for Transcendental Transformation, and we are talking about the philosophical ideology of struggle. And I couldn't get that out. See, sometimes my dyslexia kicks in, and so we all struggle with stuff. So what we were talking about beforehand is it begs the question, is if freedom real? So let's take this concept and let's start back from birth. Okay, I want us to go all the way back from birth, because since birth we've been told that we're taught what to believe, what to like, what to think, how to dress, who to hang out with. We're taught all these concepts of right versus wrong, good and bad, better and worse, but and they're given to us by the people that we trust most, which is our parents. And then it's given to us by other people, such as school, such as society, such as our friends, our relatives. And so we have all this influence. We have all these ideas of that are being put into us, all these concepts, all these conditionings into our mind. Because if you think about it, when we're born, we're all born with a clean slate, right? Our mind is wiped. We're born, we're looking at everything is fresh, we're reaching out, we're either crying or screaming or laughing, depending on how we're feeling at that moment. If we're hungry, we cry. If we gotta poop, we cry. If someone's jingling or waving at us, then all of a sudden we're laughing. And our brains and our lives are so pure at that moment. There is no conditioning taught to us. There's nothing that is taught to us. We are fresh. We are cleansed. We are clean. There is no good or bad, right or wrong. There is no you can't date this person. There is no your dress. You can't wear that. There is no you have to believe this in politics and religion. There is none of that. And so from the moment of birth, you are truly free. You have that freedom of choice at that moment of birth. And I probably want to say up until about 2 years old, when you start walking around and you start being able to comprehend, once you start speaking, you're already starting to be trained by your parents of what to say, what to do, how to act and stuff. And of course, we're children, so our parents think that they're doing the good job by being a good parent and disciplining our children and teaching them the ways that they know, because that's what they were taught. And so right then, that very moment that people start teaching us what it is that we should be thinking, that we should be believing, that we should be acting like, that we should be hanging out with, that we should dress like, right versus wrong, good versus bad, better versus worse, we start becoming conditioned. And those are when the restraints start coming on. Because when the restraints start coming on, that means our idea of freedom starts to slowly slip away. And it takes decades for our freedoms to truly be taken away. But slowly by slowly, they start being taken away. Because, hey, you're a kid, this is life, and we deem our parenting, we deem our ideas as, hey, this is beneficial to our children. This is healthy, this is what a good parent does. And so I'm going to teach my kid all these ideas. And they're supposed to help us. But how much, when we look back at past shows and everything, and if you've been around with this show for a long time, then if I bring up the concept right or wrong, that's one of my 5 no-nos. And why? Because how many times have we created that we've said, no, this is right and that's wrong, and we became angry and judgmental, and then we don't like people because they don't think as us. And if those ideas are really meant to help us, really meant to make us have a better life, then why are they creating so much chaos in it? If our belief systems are supposed to make us so much better people, then why do they create so much hate and anger, so much judgment? If I am a very open person and I like to be free. When I was younger, I would always dress a little risque. I was always that way. I had a little exhibitionism in me. And it was just one of those things where I just enjoyed who I was. But for so many people, I would get stared at. I would be looked at. I remember one time I went on a plane and I was dressed a certain way, and to me it was fine. But this lady had this problem with it from the time we got in the security checkout line. And she was literally saying stuff, looking at me with utter disgust, and looking at me and saying stuff to me. Oh, you tramp, you slut, and saying stuff like this. We even boarded the same plane, and she sat right behind me and just kept saying stuff the whole time, even until after we got off. And her husband was like, honey, shut up. like because how mean she was being to me. And there was no reason for it. But because of how she was taught, because of what she was told to believe that was right and wrong, and how to dress and how to act, she judged me into thinking that my way was wrong. That the way I looked wasn't representation or representative of the way she thinks that society and everybody should dress. Now, I had no problem with it. I never said anything back to her. I just ignored her as always the whole time. But it brought out that idea because at birth we're free. And then what we're teaching our kids and what we're learning from our parents and what we're learning from society and everything like that, we're learning conditioning. I watch Nickelodeon sometimes, and I watch how they teach the kids all the time, well, you got to do this and you got to do this. If you're not doing this, then you're not being a good citizen. You're not doing all the things that are necessary for it to be a good thing. And they're conditioning the kids that if you don't act this way, then you're not a good person. And guess what's being created? Restraint. Your freedom, your personal freedom of choice, what to think, what to believe is being taken away. And for many of us, this is how we live every single day. Our conditions are shown of what we think is supposed to be. Every time you make a comment or every time you think that someone is supposed to live a certain way, it is a reflection of how much conditioning and how much restraint you have on you. You are shackled by conditioning. You are shackled by judgments. You are shackled by the teaching of society, and this creates struggle. This is the very nature of how true freedom is squashed. This is the very nature of how everything gets piled upon us, and we get lost in these ideas. And this is the folly of humanity, to put such impressions on each other, to put these impressions, these type of impressions of judgment, of shame, of right and wrong, good and bad, all these ideas, to put this on one another and even ourselves. This is our folly. This is where humanity makes its biggest mistakes. Because in our ideas that we think that we're doing the good thing, that we're being a good citizen or a good person to create these ideas, we're creating a very limited, a very shallow, a very judgmental way of thinking. And this is what we have to change. If we want to become enlightened, if we want to become free, if we want to become these ideas that we're chasing, happy, love, all this stuff, non-judgmental, then we have to become those ideas. We have to look at this idea of freedom and say, well, if I have freedom, and this is what it is to me, then where in my life am I the most restricted? Where do I place my judgments? Where do I place my morals and values? Because as I've said before, our morals and values are nothing more than judgments on how we think the world should be. You know, if I want to believe something and for me this is the way I want to live my life and that's my moral, then that's fine. But I do not have the right to pass it on to you. And thus, we as people should not be passing it on to another person as well. If that is what you believe and how you want to live your life, then that is the way you should believe and that is the way you should live your life. But it should never, ever be to be put on somebody else. And this is why there is so much chaos in the world. You know, this is why we expect the idea, this is why I think that we expect this idea of freedom to have such value. Maybe subconsciously we know that we're not free. Maybe that we know that our mind, body, and soul are in such conditionings, are in such judgment, not only with other people, but with ourselves and how we view ourselves and what we think of ourselves, that we become lost. And then so again, is the struggle real? Is this idea of struggle real? Or is it just created by us because we are placed in judgment? Judgment is such a tricky thing in our world and in our mind. because judgment comes from the ability of not understanding the information that's being processed. If we cannot understand one another, or if we cannot understand ideas or the world, the way things work, due to somebody else telling us what to think or believe, then we can't understand information that is given to us when something else says something different. And this is a very confusing thing. And this is creating struggle. And so this, in my opinion, is why the soul begs to be set free. This is why, in my opinion, the word freedom is so powerful, because none of us are truly free. None of us, even if we are guided by the Constitution that says all men and women are free, that all people should be free, no matter of race, sexuality, gender, it doesn't matter. All people in the world should be free and have the freedom to do what they want as long as they harm none. That is an amazing thing, but it is in our very essence to be tied up, to bound ourselves to this idea. So if we are in agreement with this, then we have to agree that this way of living, that we understand that we're not free. And so I want us to understand that. I want us to close our eyes for a second and really realize and listen to that. If we agree with everything that we just said, then the way we're living, we must understand that we're not free. That if there's chaos in your life, if there's emotional, mental, physical chaos in your life in any order, you are not a free person. Because if we're not free and we're in judgment, or we're in some type of right versus wrong, good versus bad, or whatever we're in, and that we create those shackles, we put chains and we tie ourselves up and we jail ourselves, and thus struggle starts. Because if our freedom, if freedom of expression, if we have freedom of expression and freedom of what we want and who we want and what we want to be since our childhood, if we have these things, then our life changes. And so, when I first realized this, again, this lifetime, because I was going through the same thing when I was going through school, and I was going through certain things, and people would try to tell me stuff, and it wouldn't sit right with my soul. I was like, no, that just sounds so restrictive. And that it was hard for me, because people would tell me I was a bad child, that because I wasn't acting a certain way and doing what people wanted me to do, and I was rebelling against these ideas, I was a bad person. And that's how they get you. Because, hey, if you're a good person, then you follow suit. You don't question. If the government tells you to shut up your shop and go in hiding for 2 months and stuff like that, then you better do it, because you got to be a good citizen. Otherwise, you're a bad person and you don't have any respect. But it is in that very moment that you have to question everything that is told to you. And that is the idea of freedom. You may come to the conclusion that yes, that information is correct, and thus we must follow suit. But we have to question it. If we just follow what we are told our whole lives, we are bound to suffering. We are bound to struggle, because those ideas haunt us and repeat us and keep our soul. Our soul is trying to be free, because our soul is unrestricted. But our minds are so restrictive, and we understand that our mind is connected to not only our physical body, but our emotional body and our spiritual body. Imagine you being free. Imagine all these things. And then we have to look at it and we say, well, this is why we have issues. This is why we have insecurities. This is why we have self-doubt. This is why self-esteem issues are so much in our world. Because we look at it and we say, hey, I was supposed to be this person, but I'm not. Insecurity. I'm supposed to act like this, but I'm not. Self-doubt. I'm supposed to be doing all these things that my parents and society wanted me, and all my friends are doing, and everyone around me, and I'm supposed to look that way, and I'm not. So self-esteem issues. And this is where the true ego is born. The ego is the ego can be two ways. But we can have a healthy ego, but we also have a toxic ego. And we always break down in the show our ego between the victim and the survivor. And when we have these insecurities because of these ideas that, that we're creating for ourselves, because if we think about it, what is the ego? The ego, the toxic side, the victim and the survivor, what do they want? It's like a child, right? They kick and they scream. They don't care what's going on. They want. Just like a 2 to 5 year old, right? They want the crayons. They want all the toys. They want what he wants. And even 1-year-olds do that. Say, oh, they look, you put two babies together. One's playing with something. The other one grabs at it and wants, right? That is ego. And of course, that's harmless ego, but it's because once we start understanding concepts of that we don't have. And remember, this is just created in our mind. This is created in our minds that we don't have. What don't you have? What don't you have? You don't have fame. You don't have fortune. You don't have maybe the body that you want. I mean, I don't know a person in this world that doesn't have some sort of challenge in their life. They wouldn't be here. No matter how great and wonderful their life seems, I guarantee you they have struggle. Maybe they don't have financial struggle because maybe they're famous, they make money, or maybe they went and chased after a good career and they make lots of money. But there are struggles in those careers. There are struggles in those lives. And maybe because they have money, they can't find a healthy relationship. But see, we see what we want to see. We see what we adapt to. And so if our minds are saying we're without because I don't have this and this, then that's what we see in the world. We see what we don't have in the world within others. And then we reflect. And then we become jealous because what does the ego do? It's like a child. If I don't have it, I'm going to scream and kick and pout. And that way comes out as insecurity, self-esteem. It comes out in anger, jealousy, rage. It comes out in bitterness. I mean, how many of us do that? How many of us see people and for some reason we just don't like them? And it's probably because maybe they remind us of something that we wish that we were. Or maybe they remind us of something that we wish that we had. And a lot of times that's the case. So, when we feel without choice and our freedom is taken away, the ego creates need and want. And when we're in need, we create insecurity, we create struggle, we create chaos in our lives. We create those emotions. Because again, remember, emotions aren't real. Our emotions are not real. Our emotions, the experience behind the emotions is real, but our emotions aren't real. It's just energy going up and down, left or right, stagnating, whatever. It's just energy based on our perception of how we feel, and we shift energy in our body. Because the emotions is only a third-dimensional experience. It is only here that we experience emotion because it teaches us how to read information. And we'll be right back after these messages from the life of Raina.
A message from the life of Raina. We live in a world faced with many tough challenges. Our lives become chaotic and filled with disaster ever so quickly, most of the time before we even realize. Our issues beat down our mental mindset, and an imbalance of emotions become prevalent. The life of Raina is dedicated to helping people on the deepest spiritual level. Miss Raina, the creator of Transcendental Development and Growth, works on your core issues and finds the solutions which allow you to break free from the emotional bondages of life, helping you achieve the life you've always wanted to live. Isn't it time that you lived life for you? Call the Life of Raina, 561-846-2190, and schedule your appointment today. That's 561-846-2190. Or email thelifeofraina@icloud.com.
All right, everybody, we are back. If you're just joining us, of course, I'm your host, Miss Raina, and you are listening to Transcendental Transformation, and we are talking about struggle tonight. And I didn't want to give myself a second tongue twister because I know my dyslexia would jump in and make me say a word that I didn't mean to say, and it's all out of good fun anyways, right? So we were talking about the ego, and we were talking about how the chaos and how it creates need. And so we have to start we have to start understanding the child within us, because the child within us is our ego. The child within us is saying to us, I don't have, I want. I don't have this, I want. I need. But as I always say, all we need is what? Food, water, and air. Right? That's all we need to technically survive. We don't even need clothes. If we live down here in Florida, I mean, hey, you don't even really need clothes, right? As long as you have food, water, and air, you could live on your own without anything, right? And so that's where we have to take our basic instincts too. That's where we have to take our ideas too. So I want to ask us a question, and I want you to think about this. If struggle comes from ego because we are without, then does struggle is struggle created also by the mind? So what that means, so I want you to really think about that. If struggle comes from ego because we are without, then is struggle created also by the mind? So again, we're asking, is struggle real? Is struggle created by the mind? And we have to ask ourselves, why do we create struggle? If struggle comes from ego because we're without, then is struggle created by the mind? And in my mind, that exists. That's the only reason why it exists. Because the more you come to within yourself, the more you start to learn about yourself, the more you really work on your issues. And that the more struggle, the more it dissipates. The more the ego is subsided, because the ego just wants. When we have an uncontrolled ego and we're filled with anger and jealousy and bitterness and all these different emotions, anxiety and stuff like that, it is because of our inability to have freedom. It is our inability to contain the ego. And then I have to ask you, do you really work on yourselves? Do you really put the work in on yourselves? Of course not. Because if we did, we wouldn't be in struggle, or we wouldn't be in as much struggle as we would. We would be able to handle our challenges as they come by and handle what they are as they are. We wouldn't sit there and think about them for 5, 6 months to 10 years, 20 years. We wouldn't hate people just because they look like an ex of ours. We wouldn't do that if we really took the time. But see, let's be honest with ourselves. You struggle because you don't want to work on ourselves, right? We don't want to work on ourselves. We struggle because we play this game where, oh, I'm too busy to work on myself. I work too much. I have a family. I have kids. I got too much going on. And those are the excuses we give ourselves every single day to be shackled into the chains of restriction. We like to be in struggle. It is our selfish, it is our childish, it is our ego, the need that wants to keep us there. And every single day we look at it and we say, hey, I'm unhappy with this. I have low self-esteem. I have a lot of self-doubt in who I am. I don't know what's going on. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of dating the same people. I'm tired of, all the things that are going on, working for horrible people, not getting paid enough, whatever the struggle is. And that we create that because we don't want to take time to work on ourselves. We want that. We want to feel that. We want to be able to struggle with that. So if we understand that and we say, well, if struggle comes, if struggle and it comes from ego and from being without, then are we without struggle if we have within? So of course, because if we have within, if we have self-awareness, if we have compassion for ourselves, if we have self-love, if we have even if we don't have self-love or compassion, if we have an understanding of who we are, or an understanding of a want of who we are, and we put a little effort into who we are, then struggle disappears, because struggle only comes from without. So yes, if we are within, then when we're without, we'll always have with struggle. And I really want us to think about that, because when our minds like to play games. Our mind likes to play games with our thoughts and our emotions and our perceptions, and it wants to take us, and it really wants us to guess at kind of what life is and who we are. And it makes us see things and perceptions that aren't really there. And how many of us have done that? How many of us create stories and ideas about people and things and situations that really haven't happened, but our mind goes crazy and it creates all these elaborate situations and things, and it creates chaos even though nothing happened. So, this reminds me of a story, actually two stories, but I'll tell you the first one first. I knew this lady, and she always struggled with her father. It was always a struggle, and it was a very toxic relationship, very toxic. The dad was very close-minded, and she was at a point. She was at a point too, but it was always chaotic, and it was always this toxic imbalance of this relationship. And it was like he would treat her bad and kind of like shove her away and kind of just be, kind of dismissive and everything. And she was always begging for her father's affections. And no matter what, the only time that they kind of, seem to bond is sometimes when they would have like certain drinking nights and stuff like that. And, and then it would get chaotic again. And after being around this lady for quite some time, I realized why the relationship was the way it was. Well, every time that, she would start to walk away and say, hey, I'm done, blah, blah, he would give her money and pay for things like a new car or the apartment or whatever it was. And it was this very toxic relationship. And so because she got money from her father, all of a sudden all was forgiven. No matter what he did, all was forgiven. And because she thirsted for that need, that want of a dad who loved her and couldn't see it for what it really was, it was this toxic relationship that went back and forth. And this is suffering. We choose to be like this. She chose to be like this. And finally, to the point where after a while I said, you know what, I can't help you anymore in that situation. You do this to yourself, and you chase your emotion, and until you find the idea that you want to get past this is where it goes. And I also had another person that I knew that was a wheeler dealer type of person. And there's always some wheeling and dealing going on. There was always some type of sale, type of business transaction going on, and the salesperson type. And I knew this person for a while as well. And when you put two and two together, you saw that, well, this person grew up in a poor family. They didn't have a lot. They struggled for food and all that stuff. And this person also had was short. And I know how a lot of males feel when they're short. And they had, and he had that typical short man syndrome where he developed this idea that he needed to prove himself, make himself bigger. And so he developed this flashy persona of trying to be bigger than everybody else. And it created these habits of lying and compulsively, actually, and had to impress people, and created all this struggle because of all these ideas that he had in his head about who he was, because he was without, because he grew up without, and because he grew up in his mind shorter, and that meant less of a person. And in our minds it never did, but in his mind it did. And he created all this, so much more. It discredited him. It blew up in his face so bad, where everybody just looked at him and said, oh yeah, that's them. Everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie. And it was sad, really, because we look at things and we say, well, this is what we create for ourselves. So, if struggle is an illusion, then, and it's and if it's dictated by, what we choose to believe based on how we view ourselves, then what do we do to change that factor? What do we do to kind of look and say, hey, you know what? I understand that I am without because I struggle. And I really want to get that message. Anytime we have an emotional, mental, physical chaos, anytime we struggle, whatever the form of struggle is in your life, it is because our idea is without. It doesn't matter. And maybe something's not fixable. Maybe you got into a car accident and you lost one of your legs, and that's not fixable. Absolutely not, other than prosthetics. And so our mind is like, well, I'm without now. I lost part of my body. There are so many situations, and we truly trap ourselves into thinking that because we have physical limitations, mental, emotional, we're without, and we're going to create this struggle. I suffered from depression and anxiety, PTSD. I suffered from all these different things, and just constantly, there was a lot of struggle in my life, but I never saw myself as a victim. I constantly pushed through. I constantly looked at myself and said, okay, I feel I'm without in this situation. My ego says I'm without, even though I know I'm not, because, hey, look, I got my body, I got my skin, I got food on my table, I got all these different things in my life. And so where is that at? And so then I had to take things apart. I had to look at things and say, hey, well, you know what? I'm alive. I have all the tools I need to do. I have my heart, I have my brain, I have my liver, I have my blood, I have all this stuff. Even though I've been dealing with an illness for the past 3 months, and it's going to be quite some time until I'm on my feet, I'm still looking at the things that I have, because I'm not without, even though I'm sick. I'm not without. Hey, I'm still breathing, I'm still here, I'm doing the radio show, I'm still doing lots of stuff. Where am I without? But a lot of times we victimize ourselves in that area. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we need? If we're with struggle and we're without, then what is it that we need? What is it that we're truly desiring? Because if we view our lives as being so bad and so terrible, then what is it that we need? What is it we're looking for? What is it that you are looking for? You're looking for something. Because if you're not looking for something, you don't have struggle. Because remember, struggle equals without. There's a perception in my mind that I view some part of my life, that means me, that I'm without. And so if I have insecurities, if I have self-esteem issues, if I have anger, jealousy, bitterness, if I have anxiety, PTSD, whatever it is, I feel I'm without in some part of my life. Even if we've experienced something, even if we have something that wasn't, as we like to say, our fault, we were born with something, that is still creating the idea that we are without because we were born differently than everybody else. So, hey, we're different. And that is the victim within us. And so we have to change this. So then ask yourselves again, is my struggle an illusion? Do I need this struggle? What is it that I need for this struggle? Maybe we do need struggle. Maybe struggle is a necessity. Maybe it is a necessity for us to live that gives us purpose. Maybe it really does give us purpose. Maybe if we look at struggle and we say, well, we need to struggle. We do. We need to struggle as beings to grow. Without struggle, without pain and suffering, we don't learn. And for many of us, even with the pain and suffering, we don't learn. There is a lot of things we don't learn in this world, and we don't understand because we are so caught up in this idea of being without. But you're not without. There is nothing that you have without, no matter what the situation is. Transform your idea from being without to being within. Because when you're within, even if you're not there yet, and I'm not saying fake it till you make it, because you know how I feel about that. What I mean by being within, start going within and saying, hey, you know what? I deserve to start working on myself. I deserve to start figuring out myself. I deserve to start doing these things and stick to it. I mean, it's easy for a lot of people to say, "Oh, I'm gonna lose weight," and then try it for like a week or two, and then say, "Oh, I'm gonna change my habits. I'm not gonna be so angry," and then do it for like a few days and then go back. That's not being worth it. You have to truly do this to understand who it is you are. So, how do we find the purpose if we don't know who we are? How do we find the purpose if we're unwilling to look at truth of who we are? You're not. You must be willing to look at who you are in truth. And that means take responsibility for who you are. That means take responsibility for the ideas of who you are, your actions, and everything else. Because every one of us has felt without. Every one of us has felt insecure, self-doubt, self-esteem. Every single one of us either has that or has gone through that many times in our lives. And it's a very natural feeling. But you don't get rid of that unless you start working on yourself. And a lot of times we give ourselves so many excuses. We'd rather sit down and watch TV than work on ourselves, because TV makes us laugh and we just want to detach, whatever the excuse is. It is amazing how many things think. But we cannot understand this until we start understanding that what we think is not our own. So if we want to start finding ourselves, then start understanding that what you think and believe is not truly yours. You were taught religion and taught a God. You were taught politics. You were taught right and wrong, good and bad, positive and negative. You were taught these concepts that are creating chaos in your life, that are creating struggle, because they are coming from judgment. They are coming from these ideas, and it is up to you to be able to turn that around. Oh, excuse me. So, all right, guys, we're running out of time. I actually had a ton of stuff still to go over, and as always, it's always better to have more than less, right? So, all right, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's show. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at transcendentaltransformations with an S at gmail.com. Make sure you visit our Facebook at facebook.com/transcendental transformation. YouTube, the same thing. You can't visit my website soulandspiritguide.com yet, because hopefully it'll be back up in the next couple of days, and we'll make an announcement on our social media as soon as that's up. And always remember to believe in yourself, and it's not our talents, it's not our abilities or our talents that make us who we are, but it is our choices. Thank you and have a wonderful day.